Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. We're going to start. Today, we are all part of what has turned into a global moment of solidarity. There are rallies taking place as we speak in France. There are rallies planned for the United States. There are rallies that are happening or have happened in Israel. Around the world, Jews and our allies are standing together at gatherings like this to call for justice for French Jews and to show solidarity with French Jews. You're all holding in your hands a placard saying, "Je suis Sarah Halimi." We know a lot about Sarah Halimi's death. One of the things I find quite astonishing is how little we know about Sarah Halimi as a person. In many ways, Sarah Halimi was somebody that we all know, even though none of us knew her. From what I can tell, she was somebody who made something of her life. She was a doctor, she was a school teacher, she was the mother of a family. She was somebody who did not seek any kind of spotlight, would never have sought to put her face on a placard. And yet here we are, standing here with Sarah Halimi's face on a placard, demanding justice for her. Why? We're demanding justice for Sarah Halimi because one night, a man broke into her apartment, he beat and tortured her, and then he hurled her from a window to her death. During this entire disgraceful and disgusting evening, the French police waited outside. They didn't move fast enough. It took months for the anti-Semitic nature of the crime to be recognized. And now we know that following the decision of the Cour de Cassation in France, there will be no justice for Sarah Halimi in a French court. There might be justice for Sarah Halimi at the Court of Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights. There might be justice for Sarah Halimi in an Israeli court, but there will be no justice for Sarah Halimi in a French court. Rather than just gathering in the name of Sarah Halimi, I wanted everyone to take a moment before we start our demonstration to think about who this person might have been, to think about people you know who might have been like her. I would like to start just with a moment of silence to reflect on the memory of Sarah Halimi. Thank you. Friends, we're going to hear from some fantastic speakers today who are going to really put this event in its context. We're not just going to hear from British speakers, we're going to hear from French speakers. We're not just going to hear from Jews, we're also going to hear from people who stand with us against anti-Semitism who aren't Jews. I was a student in France a number of years ago. I studied law, in fact, in France for an Erasmus year in 2003-2004, and I was stunned, even then, at the level of anti-Semitism in France. When I arrived, I couldn't understand why for Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, the entire street of the small town where I lived was blockaded by police cars and the entire street closed off. I couldn't understand. Was this paranoia? Why was there so much security? Why was it even more secure than the synagogues in Britain? And as I lived there, I started to get to know the French Jewish community. And I started to understand that synagogues were being firebombed. French Jews were being stabbed. People were being constantly abused. Businesses were being desecrated. Synagogues were being desecrated. And very little seemed to be being done about it. We just looked at the most recent figures from the French Jewish Communities Protection Service. There was a 121% rise in anti-Semitic incidents in France between 2017 and now. 121%. France's Jews account for just 1% of the population, but 41% of the hate crimes that are committed in France. 41%. 1% of the population receiving 41% of the hatred. We're here with this very simple message. We're standing here in front of the French embassy saying that this is an absolutely shameful situation. We're here because Sarah Halimi deserves justice and will not receive justice at the hands of a French court. And we are here because we are sick of hearing about the plight of French Jews. We are sick of hearing about anti-Semitism running rampant in one of Europe, in one of the world's leading countries. A country that champions human rights, liberty, equality, brotherhood. This is the motto of the Republic, the French Republic. And yet here we are, standing here because there is no such thing for French Jews at the moment. French Jews are a minority that are being persecuted by anti-Semites within their society, and too little is being done. I'm going to invite our first speaker to come and join us. She's somebody who requires very little introduction. I welcome Dame Maureen Lipman. Thank you.
And here we are again, ici encore, bringing coals to Knightsbridge, defending our race again, because no one else is going to stand with us. Call My Agent is my second best program on Netflix. Les Enfants du Paradis is my favorite film. Who can fail to love Paris in the springtime, Matisse or Marron Glacé? And aside from their inexplicable worship of the comedian Jerry Lewis, La Belle France might well remain on my list of desirable destinations. However, the French decision not to prosecute the vicious killer, Billy Traoré, for the brutal murder of his next-door neighbor, Sarah Halimi, means that until French laws are intent are changed, I would rather be in Hull, which is my own home city, twinned with Sierra Leone, than cross the channel to that shitty country, as they once diplomatically labelled Israel. An innocent woman of 65 years old, a doctor and a retired teacher, she was beaten and thrown off a third-floor balcony to her death by a trained jihadist, a known anti-Semite. Now, his actions may have been compromised by the influence of cannabis, but he was compos mentis enough to shout Allahu Akbar, God is good, and deem Sarah a shaitan or Satan as he flung her out the window. As her neighbor, he had frequently terrorized her and called her daughter a filthy Jew. According to one psychiatric report, he had been, quote, troubled by Jewish artifacts in Sarah's apartment and the mezuzah on her door, which amplified the frantic outburst of hate. he will not on appeal be prosecuted. This appalling betrayal of liberty and fraternity, not to mention humanity, by the Cassation Court is the next chapter in the historic anti-Semitism of the French nation. The world has seen it in the persecution of Captain Dreyfus, in the Vichy government, in the avoidance of responsibility for rounding up Jewish citizens during the Second World War, and countless modern examples of the disregard for anti-Semitic crimes, including the obscene attack on school children in Toulouse, and the innocent deaths in the kosher supermarket, the stabbing of a Holocaust survivor, and the growing number of hate crimes against Jewish citizens, and the desecration of cemeteries with Nazi symbols. The fact is that the French government is more fearful of retribution, jihadist retribution, than they are of justice for their Jewish community. They're paralyzed by fear of race hate. The French authority it took them 2 days before the death of the other woman who was thrown out of the window, the Holocaust survivor. It took them 2 days before it was reported to the press. And outside the Jewish press, the appeal decision has barely been reported. It doesn't suit the left agenda that anti-Semitic attacks are anything other than the result of the actions of Israel. It is little wonder that French Jews are fleeing the country of their birth and heading for the diaspora in record numbers. I'm wondering, where is the world's outrage at these growing Gallic hate crimes? The courts, and now the Cassation Court appeal, have dismissed the idea of prosecuting Traoré on the grounds that he was, by the use of cannabis, and I quote, taken from a polymorphous persecutory delirium with a mystical theme. Bear with me. During which the simple, hang on to that word, the simple anti-Semitic prejudice has turned into absolute conviction. The simple anti-Semitic, the simple anti-Semitism. Simple as in ordinary, normal anti-Semitism. This man, this killer, he didn't have a brain tumor or psychosis informing his behavior. This hate-fueled jihadist was a simple anti-Semite with a drug-dealing problem. Now, to me, this makes intoxication by the use of drugs or alcohol exonerate any criminal for an accusation of violence. It says clearly that drunk drivers who kill children on the roads, who are now in prison, should walk free today. That drug users who kill to feed their addiction should all walk free. And furthermore, it says that if you want to kill a Jew with impunity, then make sure you smoke a joint or have a bottle of scotch before you do it. It says that a killer takes no responsibility for their actions because they are deluded by their drug of choice. It says in its choice of words, the simple anti-Semitism, and its insistence that Traoré's drug-fueled delusions made his crime random, not personal. It says what David Baddiel has been telling us chillingly this year, that Jews don't count. Just for a moment, please, try to imagine this murder the other way round. A 65-year-old... It happened in the theatre. A 65-year-old Jewish man throws a 27-year-old innocent Muslim woman out of the window. Would the courts have responded in the same way? Would the world media and Black Lives Matter movement have shown more interest if a Jew had murdered a Muslim? I think we all know the answer to that. There's been little press attention paid to this heinous hate crime, either before or after the appeal. Believe me. Believe David Baddiel. Believe Melanie Phillips. Increasingly, on the left and in the West, Jews don't count. Trejo's cannabis-induced psychosis didn't cause him to murder his neighbour. His consuming hatred of Jews made him do it. Macron says he wants to change the law of intent, and he says he stands with French Jews. It doesn't exactly show in the actions of the courts, and it might just show less in the actions of future President Marine Le Pen. The law in the UK distinguishes between voluntary intoxication and involuntary intoxication, when someone drugs your drink. Drunken intent is still intent. So we have a right to the European Court of Rights on the ground that the law which permits such an irrational and boneheaded defence is contrary to Article 2, the right to life. It's contrary to Article 14, non-discrimination in cases, and I quote, in cases where there is an allegation of racially motivated crime, it is particularly important that investigation is pursued with vigour and impartiality, having regard to the need to reassert continuously society's condemnation of racism and to maintain the confidence of minorities to protect them from the threat of racist violence. The French have always been regarded as one of the most civilized of European countries. It's the country of romance, sophistication, bon cuisine, but also the guillotine and foie gras. And if you can force feed a goose until his liver bursts to flavour your toast, you are probably capable for centuries of putting your knee on the neck of the Jewish race. And under such blind and bigoted injustice, we too cannot breathe. Nous ne pouvons pas respirer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen Lipman. You know, Maureen's absolutely right. It's very hard, as Jews, to stand in solidarity against racism, as we've all been doing, as we've all seen the entire world be doing. It's very hard to watch that and then hear of this grave injustice of an innocent woman thrown from her apartment and the killer escaping justice completely. Why are we so few? Why is it that in the demonstrations around the world, there are a few allies, good people who are standing here with us today, and people who are standing with us around the world, but why is it? Why is it that the majority of the people protesting this grave injustice are Jews? And is it, as Maureen says, as David Baddiel says in his books, Jews don't count? Do we not count?
Yes, we count. We taught the world mathematics.
For those who are listening in the embassy, this may look like a small demonstration, but I know, were we not limited by COVID numbers, we would be a very large group of people here today, and we would be standing here, as we are doing now, saying to the French embassy, this is not good enough. C'est honteux. It's shameful that today, in the European Union, in Europe, in the world, we have a leading country like France where Jews are in fear. And this is a very complicated legal case. It's a complicated case about criminal responsibility for people who take cannabis and then commit a crime. This is not the first time in France that somebody committed a crime whilst under the influence of drugs. It's not the first time. In fact, the same week that Kobili Traoré threw Sarah Halimi from her window, a man in Marseille took cocaine and threw a dog out of the window. That man spent a year in prison. Kobili Traore, because of the fact that he'd smoked cannabis, was not sent to prison. It's a difficult situation to understand, but to try and help us make a little bit of sense of it, we have here the head of the Hexagon Society, which is an Anglo-French think tank. She has a PhD, a doctorate in French law, European law. So please welcome Sophie Weisenfeld.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Je vais lire mon discours en français et ensuite en anglais. Alors, c'est avec émotion que je prends la parole devant vous, devant cette foule si nombreuse malgré les conditions sanitaires. Nous étions là pour Mireille Knoll aussi il y a 3 ans et on espère que c'est la dernière fois qu'on viendra pour ce genre d'acte antisémite protester devant l'ambassade de France à Londres. Si nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui, c'est parce que l'affaire Halimi n'est pas l'affaire de la communauté juive seulement, mais l'affaire de la communauté nationale et internationale tout entière. C'est une mobilisation sans précédent. Le monde entier se soulève contre cette injustice. Nous sommes en même temps avec Paris, où ils sont 15 000 personnes, avec New York, avec Los Angeles, avec Miami, Rome, même Deauville. Si nous sommes ici, c'est pour demander une loi Halimi, suite à la décision de la Cour de cassation jugeant irresponsable pénalement l'assassin de Sarah Halimi. Le droit a été dit, certes, mais la justice n'a pas été rendue. Ce qui est difficile à comprendre dans cette affaire, ce qui est terrible, ce qui est révoltant, c'est que tout en retenant le caractère antisémite du crime, la justice française a confirmé l'irresponsabilité pénale du meurtrier de Sarah Halimi. Hélas, dans le droit positif français, en cas de trouble mental provoqué par une prise volontaire de toxiques, il y a irresponsabilité pénale. Mais les juges de la Cour de cassation n'ont pas saisi l'opportunité qui se présentait de faire jurisprudence comme ils ont l'habitude et comme ils peuvent le faire. Et se sont contentés d'une interprétation restrictive des textes. Je conclurai sur ces mots de mon cher ami, le philosophe Bernard-Henri Lévy, qui m'a permis de vous lire ces mots à lui. Quand une loi est lacunaire ou inadaptée, ou qu'elle ne permet plus de juger avec sagesse, c'est la grandeur d'une démocratie de la remettre sur le métier. Et cette nouvelle loi, même si elle ne permettra, hélas, pas de rendre rétroactivement justice à la victime, je suggère de la nommer loi Sarah Halimi. Alors, souhaitons que son meurtre ne sera pas vain et que sa famille puisse faire son deuil et qu'il n'y ait plus d'actes antisémites comme ça sur le sol français. Merci. So I will say the same thing a bit in English because we are half English and half French. So it is with great emotion that I speak in front of such a large crowd despite the sanitary conditions. It is an unprecedented mobilization. The whole world is rising up against this injustice. We are at the same time with Paris, 10,000 people, with New York, with Los Angeles, with Miami, with Rome. The reason why we are here today is because the Halimi affair is not the matter of the Jewish community alone, but the matter of the entire national and international community. If we are here, it is to ask for a new loi Halimi, due to the decision of the Cour of Cassation finding the murderer of Sarah Halimi criminally irresponsible. The law has been said, but the justice has not been served. What is difficult to understand in this case, what is terrible, what is revolting, is that while retaining the anti-Semitic nature of the crime, the French justice has confirmed the criminal irresponsibility of the murderer of Sarah Halimi. Because in French positive law, in the event of a mental disorder caused by a voluntary price of toxicants, there is penal irresponsibility. Alas, the judge of the Court of Cassation did not take the opportunity to make jurisprudence and be satisfied with a restrictive interpretation of the text. I will conclude with these words from my dear friend, the philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy, who allowed me to read you this text from him. When a statute is flawed or unsustainable, or when it no longer leads to wise decision, it is the mark of a democracy's greatness to take on the task of reworking it. And even if the new legislation will not make it possible to render retrospective justice to the victim of the latest hate crime, I suggest calling it Sarah Halimi's law. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sophie.
Great, thank you.
Friends, our next speaker is a French political commentator on YouTube, Raphael Landau, and he's going to try to convey to us, I know that a lot of us are French Jews who live in London, but a lot of us also aren't fully familiar with the exact circumstances of what has been happening to French Jews over the last couple of decades. So Raphael has very kindly agreed to speak to us to try to put in context exactly what the French Jews have been facing. Please welcome Raphael Landau.
Thanks, Gideon. Hello, everyone. The court decision was a shock for all of us. It states that Kobili Traoré wasn't criminally responsible for his acts. Right. Now, today, right now, I'd like to reflect on some comments made in the mainstream media. You may have heard about the decision by two French lawyers, one of them called William Goldnadel, to initiate an action in Israel. Following this decision, I won't comment on this decision, but following this decision, some people in the media said that it showed that the Jewish community was lacking confidence in the authorities. Why such a distrust? Why? For a community, the Jewish one, who has been present in France since the 1st century. Why? Let's travel back 20 years, right? For a minute. 2001. People burn synagogues in Paris, in other cities. The Prime Minister at the time, Lionel Jospin, tell the Jewish leaders to be low-profile, not to add fuel to the fire. Homeland Security Minister says that people who burn synagogues aren't anti-Semites. They are hooligans, lost people, social causes. 2003, Sébastien Selam is disfigured by a fork and a knife. He's found killed in the 10th arrondissement of Paris. Give me a sec, sorry. He was killed by Adel Amasteibo. 2006, Ilan Halimi, a young Frenchman of Moroccan Jewish ancestry, kidnapped, tortured and murdered by a group calling itself the Gang of Barbarians. The kidnappers, believing that all Jews are rich, repeatedly contacted the victim's modestly placed family, demanding very large sums of money. Halimi was held captive and tortured for 3 weeks and died of his injuries. March 2012, Mohamed Merah opened fire at the Ozar HaTorah Jewish Day School, killing a rabbi and 3 children, Jonathan Sandler, Gabriel Sandler, 3 years old, Aryeh Sandler, 6 years old, Myriam Monsenego, 7 years old. 2014, demonstrations on the streets in support of the people of Gaza. Demonstrators singing Itbach al Yahud, let's slaughter the Jews. They tagged Jewish shops, some even circling a synagogue when a family was celebrating inside. January 2015, Ahmedi Koulibaly pledged allegiance to the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant. Armed with a submachine gun, an assault rifle, and 2 Tokarev pistols, he entered and attacked the people in the kosher food supermarket. He murdered four Jewish hostages: Johan Cohen, Philippe Saada, François Michel Saada, sorry, I made a mistake, and Yoav Attab. 4th of April 2017, Dr. Sarah Atal Halimi, a 65-year-old Jewish woman who was a retired physician and mother of 3 children, was beaten, disfigured, and defenestrated by her neighbor, Kobeli Traoré. 23rd of March 2018, Mireille Knoll, an 85-year-old French Jewish woman and Holocaust survivor, who was murdered in Paris, in a Paris apartment, stabbed 11 times before being set on fire. So for the last 18 years, 12 French citizens have been murdered simply because they were Jewish. I could have also mentioned scenes of Jewish life in our France, 21st century. Youth beaten on the street, soldiers protecting the synagogues, Jewish schools bunkerized. Some start as well. Jewish families leaving some neighborhoods, which are called sensitive neighborhoods. Trapp, for example, which hosted one of the oldest Jewish community, there is no Jew anymore. So let's conclude. Many people ask me to talk about the court decision. Has the judge made a mistake? Should the law be changed? Were the psychiatrists biased? To tell you the truth, I don't know. I was shocked, but I don't know. What I do know, on the other hand, is that judges are not responsible for what the mainstream media ironically call the new anti-Semitism. Politicians are. They turn a blind eye on what happened to the Jews over the last 20 years. Politicians are responsible. They have turned a blind eye on what happened to the Jews for the last 20 years. We must demand our politicians to address the root cause of the problem. Elie Wiesel used to say that Jews have antennas because of their history, their suffering. And these antennas, they tend to vibrate when the danger is coming. For the last 20 years, these antennas have been vibrating more and more, and politicians will be better off listening to these antennas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raphael Landau. Thank you, Raphael. Before we hear from our next speaker, if you turn around and look where I'm looking, you will see a photographer on the ladder. You already got it, exactly. If you hold your placards up nice and high for the photographer. Hold still. Okay, now if you can have a look at your placard, if it says Je suis Sarah Halimi, the side that says Je suis Sarah Halimi, please point that towards the camera. So Je suis Sarah Halimi. Okay, and if you now turn your placard around, so it says J'accuse, solidarity with French Jews. Thank you. Our last speaker, Liz. I can't quite see you, but I know you're here somewhere. Liz, hi. So we have a fantastic ally of the Jewish people against anti-Semitism. I'd like to give a welcome. Unfortunately, Liz gets the booby-trapped microphone. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Liz Arif-Fir, who joins us from Muslims Against Anti-Semitism. Stepped in at the last minute. Thank you very much for being here, Liz.
Thank you to Campaign Against Anti-Semitism for inviting Muslims Against Anti-Semitism to speak today. I'm here as a member of Muslims Against Anti-Semitism. We're a UK-based charitable organisation devoted to fighting anti-Semitism in the Muslim community. And we're here, like each and every one of us, to fight the injustice of the Sarah Halimi case. Sarah Halimi's family deserve justice. As has already been pointed out, the murderer...
Just give me 1 moment. Our sound engineer here is just going to switch over to the old-fashioned microphone with batteries. With a cable which never runs out of batteries. So if you just give us 1 moment, you might hear a couple of loud bangs.
1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Sorry about that.
The murderer, as has already been explained earlier, was someone who was inspired by Islamist ideology and hate. As a Muslim, it was very shocking to hear him shouting Allahu Akbar and referring to Sarah as a shaitan, which is a devil in Arabic. The murderer must face justice. And at Mass, we stand against anti-Semitism in all its forms, whether that's from the far right, the far left, or if it's inspired by Islamist anti-Semitism. I and my colleagues at Mass will always stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters. We believe that we're stronger together, and we want Jews across Britain, France, wider Europe and the world to know that you do have allies, and that we recognise the diverse range of anti-Semitism in all its forms, as we said, far left, far right and Islamist theology. You're not alone, and at Mass we'll always stand with you and speak out as allies, standing up whenever anti-Semitism presents itself and wherever it comes from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. You know, it's a fantastic thing that Muslims Against Anti-Semitism exists. What wonderful allies, how wonderful it is to have allies from the Muslim community who come with us on a day like today to stand with us and to decry anti-Semitism, including anti-Semitism from the Muslim community, as sadly in this case is what we're facing. Friends, our rally is pretty much at an end, but I think we need to speak directly so that the embassy behind us can hear. They know that we're here. They know that we have a message. And if you'll forgive my French, if you'll excuse my French, I'll try and say it in French. Pour la République, pour avoir une République, il doit avoir la justice. Et pour Sarah Halimi, et trop souvent pour les Juifs de France, il n'y a pas de justice. Quand nous avons des années, comme on a vu, de synagogues brûlées, de Juifs qui ont été même tués dans la République, torturés, tués, et quand il n'y a pas de justice, et quand ça continue et persiste pendant des années, il faut dire que ce n'est pas un problème des individus, c'est un problème de la République, c'est un problème pour la France et c'est honteux. It's shameful. Nous voulons respecter la France, nous voulons avoir le respect pour la France parce que nous voulons avoir cette idée que la France est le pays d'égalité, fraternité, liberté. Mais ça ne peut pas être le cas pendant que les Juifs de France se trouvent en danger et face à l'antisémitisme. Donc pour la France, nous disons c'est le temps, it's time. It's time to act. On a eu assez des grandes déclarations des hommes politiques. C'est le moment maintenant pour l'action, pour la justice d'être renforcée, si ça c'est un mot. Et pour nos confrères et consoeurs français, nous sommes ici en solidarité avec la communauté juive de France. Vous n'êtes pas seuls, nous sommes ici avec vous et nous ferons ce que nous pouvons pour vous aider dans votre lutte pour la justice. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely grateful, and all of us at Campaign Against Anti-Semitism are extremely grateful to you for coming. Again, I'd like to thank our fantastic speakers, Dame Maureen Lipman, Sophie Weisenfeld, the head of the Hexagon Society, Raphael Landau, the political commentator, Liz Arifir from Muslims Against Anti-Semitism, I apologize for all of the difficulties that we've had because of COVID regulations. I'm extremely grateful to everybody for working with our stewards and for helping us. Thank you very much to all of our stewards who have been here keeping us organized and keeping us safe. I'd like to particularly thank my colleague Anthony, who might be, I don't know where Anthony is. Anthony has done a huge amount to make today possible at short notice. If any of you would like to donate to Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, it obviously would be very helpful to us in putting on rallies like this. You just go to antisemitism.org/donate, antisemitism.org/donate. And if you would like to get involved in what we do, we seek to ensure that there is zero tolerance of anti-Semitism in this country and around the world. We take a great deal of legal action, we take action in the media, and we work with the government to try to ensure that anti-Semitism is fought back so that we don't find ourselves